What's up, guys? Welcome to Truth and Transparency. This is the nuts. Again, welcome subscribers, members. Subscribers, members. Oh, wait, my mods. How can I forget them?
What is web sleuthing? Well, it's an individual who uses the internet to search for information about a person or an event, basically acting as a detective while trying to solve a crime. Victimology is part of the profile.
Yeah.
So, yeah, knowing all the victims, and that's kind of, I think, why you go social media. You just scour their social medias to find out everything you can about them. And then their families, their parents, where they work, what they do.
Yeah.
Who they're friends with.
Yes.
Okay, so we have one house, 6 beds, 3 baths. Anything else that we're missing to talk about the 2 entry? I mean, is that you got 2 entry points with the doors? Obviously, you have the bunch of windows.
Yeah, and then there's questions that I would be making note of. I would want to know at that point. Were they locked? Were the doors usually locked? What kind of locks? You're gonna want to know all that stuff. Were there any windows that were open? Are they all closed? Are the windows ever locked? Were the lights on in the house? Were the lights off? How well lit is the yard? So all that kind of stuff is going to tell you about the offender.
Okay.
Because you're going to be looking at what kind of a person does this. Because when you profile, you don't profile the person, you profile the type. We don't ever say this is your person.
Exactly.
We say this is the type of person. It's your job, cops, to figure out who that is. I just tell you the general, this is the type of person you're looking for. But everything that you have down, yes, so far that's what part of what you would be looking at.
So I'd call you up and I'd say, we're just going to say that your name's Sue. So, hey, Sue, I got a crime here and I want to know could you help me out? Would you be happy to profile this for me? What information would you need me to give you? It's limited right now. The cops are being very, very tight-lipped, but what would you need in order for you to profile this?
Yeah, and I would tell you I would need to know victim, how many victims, gender of victims, location of the crime, weapon, if we know what that was, injuries that were sustained, a description of the location.
Okay.
That kind of, you would at least want that kind of stuff.
Okay. And so, with it being
All right, here we go, guys. Welcome again to Truth and Transparency. Obviously, in the trial, based on what Anne just wrote in her motion, she is going to. She said that Brian Culver was driving. He drives at night. That's nothing new. But that she is going to have expert witnesses. She anticipates expert witnesses. And she also anticipates being able to cross-examine the state's witnesses. And that's actually going to be a lot of her case. So she is going to have her own experts, and then she's going to be cross-examining the state's witnesses. So what I went ahead and did is I'm going to show and prove that there's a problem with the state's case, and it was actually right in front of our faces. I've mentioned it back in January and February, but we're going to come back to it because now I believe I see what Anne is possibly talking about and what she's going to show. So obviously the state puts on their case first, and so they bring out their witnesses. And then the state will say, the state rests. But during and before that happens, each time a state witness takes the stand, they are going to testify to what is their direct testimony, okay? Their direct examination. And then after they are done with their direct, so someone like Bill Thompson is going to be questioning and having the police go through, what they did. And then if it's a witness like a Bethany or a Dylan, again, going to question them. And then they're going to say no, no more further questions for this witness. At that time, the defense then has the opportunity, if they choose to cross-examine that witness. And that is what Ann Taylor is talking about when she's talking about cross-examining the state's witnesses, the state's case. So today what we're going to do is, there was an FBI agent that was consulted when Officer Payne made his PCA. He talked about consulting with experts. Okay, we heard it from Ann talking about that she was trying to get information through discovery on who these experts were. They weren't willing to give up these names. Dates on reports period. So here we are. We're treating this as if it was in trial. Okay, so the probable cause affidavit's going to be coming up on the screen at certain times. And then this Google Earth outline that I did is going to be used during the cross-examination. But in order for you guys to understand it, it's coming from the prosecution first, which is their case, which comes from the PCA. So I'm going to share the screen. At the point in time when investigators were given access to video footage on Washington State University's campus located in Pullman, Washington. A review of that video indicated that at approximately 2:44 a.m., so this officer or FBI agent would be testifying to the video that they looked at, pointing out the vehicle, showing the timestamp, stating how and why they believe it is a white sedan that is consistent with a white Hyundai Elantra, okay? And they're going to be going in basically what you read here, okay? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read it really quickly, and then we're going to be treating it like a cross-examination. And the reason is because then I can show this to you guys in real time on why I believe this is going to blow up. So they're going to be pointing out on a map to show that 244 timestamp. They're then going to be showing the 253 timestamp of a white sedan, which is consistent with the description of the white Elantra known as suspect vehicle 1. It was observed traveling southeast on Nevada Street. So they're going to, be pointing all of this out on a map that has the actual video surveillance. Okay. And then they're going to then bring up right here that this video was given to the FBI examiner. Yep, this is the video I looked at. Yep, this is where I said that it was a 2014-2016 Hyundai Elantra from observing the WSU cameras. Okay. Then the state will say, no more further questions for this witness. Then this is what I believe Ann Taylor is going to do. All right. So basically, was the FBI just given, what type of background was the FBI given when they chose to pick out, this car, the timestamp? You were just told to here you go. What vehicle is this? Were you given any information? So a question that would come about is this the only camera on WSU's campus that you looked at? Because it says there was one camera, but then it says plural cameras. How many cameras did you look at on WSU's campus for the 244 and 253 timestamps? Was it multiple cameras? Was it from the same camera? Again, we don't know that answer, but that's what's going to be, I believe, asked. Now, so it's correct to say that the PCA, nor you know anybody, has seen a white Hyundai Elantra leaving Brian Kohlberger's apartment that night or returning that morning. Was there any cameras? And they're going to say, obviously yes or no to that. Then I'm going to show and say, okay, at 244, you indicated in your direct examination that you have a vehicle that you see that is consistent with a white sedan, and you see it actually going north. So I'm going to show you something here, which is my draw up of Google Earth to show you that here's Steptoe Apartments over here. And your first sighting of Brian Kohlberger's alleged white Elantra is at 244. And isn't it actually heading away from 270 when you're saying that it's heading north? So right here, where you say you see it at 244, it's heading north. So right here is 270, isn't that correct? So at 244 and at 253, how do you know that the car you see at 244 is the same car that you see at 253? How are you determining the car that you see at 2:44 a.m. heading north, which would be away from 270? You don't know, isn't that correct? It could be two different vehicles. Could it be two different vehicles at 2:44 and at 2:53? Yeah, it probably could be, couldn't it? Hold on 1 second. So, Mr. FBI agent, 244 and 253, those could be two different vehicles, right? You said there's 22,000 white Elantras that meet the criteria of a 2011, 2013. I wonder how many there are to meet the criteria of 2011, 2016. So there's nothing that's stating that those two vehicles are the same vehicle. Isn't that correct? Could those in fact be two different vehicles? Yes. Okay. So, and isn't it true that 2:44 a.m. you said isn't it heading away from 270? Isn't that correct? Now, between Brian Kohlberger's apartment and that point, did the prosecution have any other cameras to look at? So you never saw this car going there, leaving there. This car just is appearing right here at Nevada and Stadium. But at 2:44, it's heading away. Okay, so then there's no sighting of that 2:44. You're not able to track it. They don't show you. You're looking at them the same camera at 2:53. Isn't that correct? And at 2:53, you advised that what was observed to be a sedan, a white sedan, which is consistent with the description of the white Elantra. But you cannot sit here and say with certainty that that's the same vehicle, right? Okay. And you observe it traveling southeast on Nevada Street in Pullman towards State Route 270, towards it. But do you actually see it turn onto 270? Do you physically see it turn onto 270? Do you see the 253 sighting where it's heading towards 270? Do you actually see it turn on to 270? So it is quite possible that it went right versus left or left versus right. You don't know. It's just heading in the direction toward 270. But you don't physically ever see it on 270. Okay. Now, the car that you are listing as a 2014 2016, was that the 2:44 a.m. car or the 2:53 a.m. car? Again, in Pullman, you said it was between a 2014 to 2016. You were provided the same, you said that you identified the vehicle observed in Pullman as a 2014 to 2016. So was that the 2:44 a.m. car or the 2:53 a.m. car? Okay. Now, why couldn't the 2:44 a.m. car be a 2011 or 12 or 13? Like, why couldn't it be a 2011 or a 12 or a 13? Can you explain that? Why did you eliminate that it couldn't be those years? And now, is it your testimony? The prosecution didn't touch base on it, but if this vehicle is in Pullman at 2:44 and then again at 2:53, which they could possibly be two different vehicles, correct? Correct. They couldn't possibly be in Moscow at the same time. Isn't that correct? You can't be at two places at once. Isn't that correct? Okay. Were you aware that Kaylee's and Maddie's phone stopped working at 2:52 a.m.? No, they don't talk to me about that. Okay. Did they talk to you at all about the phones? Do you work with the phone pings, or are you just strictly just looking at cars and saying what they are? Okay, just curious. Okay, so let's go back to now. We're going to look at this. And you consulted with Officer Payne, isn't that correct? Okay. And so when you looked at the footage from Moscow by the home, you said that it could be a 2011 to 2016. I'm sorry, a 2011 to 2013. Isn't that correct? So you actually identified or possibly identified actually three different vehicles. The one at 2:44, the one at 2:53, and then another car in a completely different state and that you totally said it was 2011, 2013, right? So we're talking about three potential different vehicles. In order to eliminate a 2011 and 2012 and 13, to make it go into a different bracket of a 2014, 15, or 16 vehicle of an Elantra, there would be like exterior differences. Isn't that correct? And if you would be able to see and have a clear image of a headlight, you'd be able to correctly identify if it was a 2011 or a 2016. Isn't that correct? But if you couldn't see a clear image, you wouldn't be able to. If it was fuzzy, or then you would, you wouldn't be able to exclude those years. Isn't that correct? Okay. Now, did they ever tell you what time they thought the crime was? Did they ever tell you anything about it? Did they ever say, hey, in order for the car that you identified at 244, for it to be the same one that you identify here coming up at 525, did they tell you anything about it? Did they ask you, hey, do you think that the 525 car that you're about to identify here is the same as the car at 244 or at 253 or over in Moscow at 329, 326? Okay. Now let's take a look at this. I don't know if you're aware that there are 30 traffic cams in Moscow area, to include a couple that are out in Genesee and Uniontown, Lewiston, and then you have Pullman, which has 30. Are you aware of that? So there's 60 traffic cams. Okay. And were you given any of the traffic cams? Were these all residential? What cameras were they? And how many cameras were there in between each point? So if you wanted to track a car, you'd go to the next camera. Isn't that correct? That would be in the path. So how many cameras were there total, different cameras that actually caught this vehicle? What I mean by that is, let's go ahead and take a look at this. I'm going to share with you what Officer Payne referred to as your 5:25 a.m. Okay. Now, at approximately 5:25 a.m., a white sedan, which is consistent with the description of the suspect vehicle, was observed on 5 cameras in Pullman. Okay. Did you take all 5 cameras and say, yep, that is not only consistent with it being the 2014 and 2016, but it's the same vehicle? And how were you able to do that? Was that because you followed it from cam to cam to cam? And it was like in succession, like where it would be like just 30 seconds later, 10 seconds later. Okay. All right. So then we get to the first camera that you consulted on, and it was at 1300 Johnson Road in Pullman, which is the Kingdom Hall, the Jehovah Witness building. Isn't that correct? Okay. And it stated that the white sedan was observed traveling northbound on Johnson Ave or road, or was it Ave? And this leads directly back to West Palouse River Drive in Moscow, this Johnson Road. Now, is Johnson Road the same as 270? No, it's not, is it? Okay. So this white Hyundai Elantra that is consistent with this vehicle, they want you to ask you a bunch of questions on. You are identifying it from a camera on Johnson Road. Then you are identifying it from Bishop Boulevard and northwest on State Route 270. Now, how come you're able to find it on northwest and physically on State Route 270, but heading out of town, there are no sightings of it on 270? Well, that might be a better question for Officer Payne. This is just what I was given. Okay, well, we'll stick with this. So, let me go ahead and bring out my map so I can better show you what I mean here. Here we go. So I'm going to back out here a little bit. Oopsies. So there's a cam that's over here. There's 30 of them, and you never saw any of these. Wine Street cam, 95 on West Police River Drive, East D Street in Maine by the gas station. Okay. Like I said, there's 30 of them, but let's just back up and take a look here. All right, so here's Johnson Ave. Okay. Move it for you. 1300. All right, and this is 1300. This is Johnson Ave, right? Okay, and right here, this is 270. Isn't that correct? Or is that Bishop? Where's 270? This is 270. Yeah, this is 270. Okay. And this, oh, okay, so yeah, this is Bishop, this is Johnson. Okay. And I noticed here that it says that the white sedan was observed traveling northbound on Johnson Ave. So this would be northbound, isn't that correct? So it's like coming from, and it would be consistent with being on Johnson Ave. Because where else could it come from? Did it come from 270? No, we didn't. No, it's not coming from 270. It's coming northbound up this way. Okay. And this is at 5:25 in the morning. Isn't that correct? Now, when you were consulting with Payne, did he tell you and go and look through how many people on Johnson Ave, that street that he says goes directly into Moscow? Do any of those people own white sedans that are consistent with a 2014, 2016 white Honda Elantra? I have no idea. Okay. That'd be a better question for Payne, right? Probably. That would be his investigation. Okay. So at 5:25 a.m., you said you look at 5 cameras, and at 5:25, the first one is the 1300 Johnson. Was this did this match the 2:44 a.m. car that you saw or the 2:53 a.m. car? Which one was it? And then again, you're looking at these cameras, Bishop Boulevard and Northwest on State Route 270. And then at 5:27, the white Elantra was observed on cameras. This time you're physically calling it a white Elantra, was observed on cameras traveling northbound on Stadium Way. And then you said Stadium Way at Grimes, Stadium Drive at Wilson Road, and Stadium Way at Cougar Way. But none of those cameras were shown to you previously to identify the 2:44 a.m. or 2:53 a.m. You just saw the one camera. And none of these are physically going back to, so the car at 5:25 a.m. that is consistent with 2014, 2016, and that's coming from Johnson Ave, not State Route 270, not the big loop that would take you the way that the investigators are saying. And they put this big old loop in. So at 5:25 a.m., you can actually track this car a lot more off of 5 cameras, right? And this is consistent with a 2014 to 2016. And do you know which car it was? Was it the 2:44 a.m. one or the 2:53? Was it any of them? Are all of those sightings the same vehicle? Can you say that? Is it possible that the 2:44 a.m. is also the 5:25 a.m., but not the 2:53 a.m.? Isn't that possible? So it's possible that at 2:44 a.m., that vehicle scene could also be the 2:50 or the 5:25 a.m. car that comes back, or that is seen on Johnson, 1300 Johnson. But is it also possible that it could be the 2:53 a.m. car and the 5:25, like those two could be a pair? But it is possible, right, that the 2:44 a.m. and the 2:53 a.m. are different vehicles, right? And you can't tell on the 2:44 or the 2:53 a.m. Well, 2:44, it's heading back to, like, it looks like possibly upwards towards where Brian lives. It's going north. It's not going south to get on 270, the 2:44 a.m. one. And there was no other sightings. But then poof, here at 2:53, they just want you to identify the make and model. Do they want you to identify, is it the same vehicle that you saw at 2:44? Is it just consistent with what? Are they asking you, is it the same vehicle, 2:44 and 2:53, and it was just missing for 9 minutes? But it is totally possible that those are two different vehicles, right? Perfect. And there's no way to tell if the 2:53 and the 2:44 vehicle is the same as the 5:25 that's coming back on Johnson Ave. Now, the reason I ask this is because Sergeant Blaker and Officer Payne had two totally different endings on what happened on November 12th or November 13th in the early morning hours. Officer Blaker says that Brian just went straight home. Officer Payne says that Brian went on a loop-de-loop. Do you know why that is? I should probably ask Officer Blaker and Officer Payne, right? So how could it be that, I'm going to go show you guys this. If the pings take you on this type of a loop, right? Okay. Now, how is it that none of these cameras on that loop, that none of these cameras are being used or being able to cite this white Hyundai Elantra during that time frame? It's the cameras that are only being used. There's no cameras that are being used out this way, but there are traffic cams all over this area on 95, the way that they say that everything is pinging, and then it comes back and loops around. Let me show you what I mean. So Johnson Ave isn't 270, right? Is Johnson Ave 95? So let me ask you this. This will be a question that Payne gets asked. This will be a question that Blaker gets asked. just for purposes, right here, the white sedan was observed traveling northbound on Johnson Ave. And this actually, if you go the opposite way, is saying that it leads directly back to West Palouse River Drive in Moscow, which intersects with Constagna Drive. You see how it says leads directly? It gets a straight shot. So if Brian was to race out of there at 420 and head on this straight shot, okay, he's heading straight back on this straight shot, right? Well, then why isn't the vehicle being not seen prior to 525? This drive would only take let's see. What, 20 minutes? Do you see a car at 4:45 a.m.? So this vehicle can't. Hold on a second, let me get my water. Okay. Sorry, I had to clear my throat there. So if Johnson Ave isn't 270, and Johnson Ave leads you directly into Palouse, then I have a question. Why didn't any of these cameras right here Johnson Ave, going along all the way down here, Johnson Ave. Okay, Johnson Ave coming in through here. Take a look. See? Johnson Ave going like this. Where? And you have to split off here and get on over here. Okay? And this takes you there. To come in this way. Okay? Or what? But guess what, guys? There's traffic cams. There's a traffic cam over here, right? Boom, there. Okay? 700 over here, Indian Hills. Like this daddy right here, you're not getting to 700 Indian Hills without getting past daddy right here, which is US 95 and West Palouse River Drive. Not getting past this. You're also not going to get past other ones. Okay? But also, if it's a direct line that goes from, like I just showed you, then what is this talks about Brian coming all this big old loop this way to come in through here? If he took this direct, I mean, how does he get on Johnson over here for this vehicle to be seen at 525? Let me show you what I mean, even more so. Okay? Right here. This is it. This is the Jehovah Witness building that had the cameras, and they have a shit ton of cameras. They have cameras, actually, that can see stuff coming from this way, okay? But if you zoom in, and you're talking about Bishop, right here. That's what that is. Come here. Come out. This is 270. And all that's at 525, which is consistent with my client, Brian Kohlberger, driving at 525 out that time. Right? Him driving in these back roads. Him driving in these back roads all through. But what it's not consistent is if he's taking a straight shot to come from West Palouse at that time, okay, then he's not out in Uniontown. He's not out in Genesee. He's not out that way if he's taking a straight shot. You cannot get on that camera, okay? You'd be coming from a different way to get on that camera from the Jehovah's Witness and not, they said it is consistent with being on 95 and making that loop. Okay. Well, I think where stuff's going to get real whack is right here when you start talking about the 5:25 a.m. sighting of this vehicle and where it's coming from. My question is Officer, when they would be doing Officer Payne, Officer Blaker, did you guys go and get these cameras, all these traffic cams? Were any of them useful? Were any of them helpful? Did any of them show this vehicle? Did you show any of those cameras to the FBI to consult with? Did you use any of those? Do you have any vehicle that's leaving Steptoe Apartments? Do you have any vehicle that's arriving back at Steptoe Apartments? No and no. Okay. You have a vehicle that you're picking up out of what? Well, we couldn't do it until what? Until we got the warrant for what? The historical data, which came December 23rd. So now you look at these reports and you see the dates, okay? And so if they have any information on any ping of Kohlberger's phone prior to December 23rd, they didn't have a, what do you call it? They didn't have a warrant yet for any of that information. None of that information would be available until December 23rd. So let me get this straight. We have a sighting of Brian, or we have a sighting of a car at 2:44 a.m. and then a sighting of a similar car at 2:53 in the same area. But you don't have any sightings of that vehicle anywhere else after 2:44 and between 2:53 to show its movements anymore? No. So it could be two different vehicles, right? Yes. It could be two different vehicles. Yes. Okay. Because you don't see Brian Kohlberger in either one of those vehicles, do you? No, you don't. Okay. So we don't know whose vehicles those are. They're just consistent with what? they're consistent with a make and model that the police were looking for in connection with Moscow. So those two vehicles match a description of what the cops are looking for at the King Road area, right? Yes. Okay, but what is that description? Is it a 2011 to 2013? Because those don't match that, right? No, they don't. Okay, perfect. So when were you consulted again to look at the video again and to say, why never change my position on the Washington videos? Those are 2014, 2016. And then this is where you would show, okay, here's what 2014 looks like. Here's what a 2016 looks like. The lights are different. This is different. This is different. How are you? So which one is it, a 2014 or a 2016? Because Brian's 2015 is no way, shape, or form what looks like a 2014. So that tells me when you're using a gap like that, it would be whatever was added on. You cannot distinguish that from the cameras. Now, Officer Blaker says that somebody, Brian, came directly home. And that's why he wanted a search warrant to search that house, or apartment rather, because he went directly home. Were there any cameras showing a white Elantra coming back home, which would take, what, 20 some minutes? So isn't it possible that the 5:25 a.m. on Johnson Road, which is nowhere coming off of 270, it had to come from some other place, right? Which leads you by Moscow, right? Yeah. So therefore, he would be pinging in the Moscow area, but he's over coming from the Johnson Ave street. And there's no way that the 244 and the 253, there's no way to say that that is that's the 5:25 a.m. You guys understand this? You're not able to identify that all of these sightings, there's nothing connecting them. There's nothing connecting them. And that's what's going to come, and that's what's going to be said, is that share the screen. The PCA doesn't have this car ever going to his apartment or leaving his apartment, correct? So there's a 1 in a 22,000 chance that it's his. And that's just the criteria of a 2011, 2013. Number 2, how many cameras are there between his apartment and the first sighting? Did you look at those cameras? Did you obtain those cameras? Did they help? Because if they helped and they saw it, you put it in there, right? You couldn't find any consistent vehicles. How many are there, though? And they're going to say that, and they're going to say how many there are, and they're going to say, "Did you use any of those?" No, we didn't. Why not? Well, because we couldn't find the vehicle. So would that be consistent with it traveling that path? Well, no, it's not on the camera. Okay. At 2:44 a.m., it's heading away from 270. Isn't that correct? You have it heading the opposite direction. 9 minutes later at 2:53 a.m., a similar vehicle reappears, but it's heading towards 270. Is it actually on 270? The answer to that is no, it's not on 270. Okay. You don't see it get on 270. Isn't that correct? No. What way does it turn? I don't know. So the 2:53 a.m., which is 2016, it's in Pullman. So this car couldn't have been in Moscow, right, at 2:52 a.m. when Kaylee and Maddie's phones were no longer working at that point. Both stopped at the same time. Explain to me why the 2:53 sighting of this vehicle, do you believe that it's the 2:44 a.m. sighting? Why? What are the same characteristics? Okay. And why can you eliminate a 2011, 2012, 2013? How are you able to eliminate that but keep in 2014? Because 2014 shares the same lights as these three models. This is where they're going to get tripped up. So when you look at the 2:44 a.m. footage, is it the same camera, 2:53 a.m.? So did you look at that footage separately? You look at that footage separately. Can you determine that those two sightings are the same vehicle? And the answer to that is going to be no. This answer right here. So we have two vehicles within 9 minutes of each other. We're in the same area, which that's, it's at 2:44 a.m., right? One goes one way and one goes the other way. Isn't that correct? So one of them could be my client. Isn't that correct? And one of them could not. Isn't that correct? Because Brian said he was out driving. He was out driving like he does. Okay. Now check this out. You want to show then there's nothing else to be seen until 3:26. Okay. And you want to start talking about the 700 block of Indian Hills. And then you got one question. That vehicle that you have in Moscow, is it the 2:44 a.m. sighting or is it the 2:53 a.m. sighting? Or could it possibly be a totally different vehicle? And the answer to that is, well, I don't know if it's this one. I don't know if it's that one. And yes, it could be a totally different vehicle. Now, again, how do you know that that car you observed at 2:44 a.m. is the same car at 2:53 a.m.? How do you know this? I don't know it. And that's it. You don't know. Isn't that correct? That is correct. And now we're going to throw in another sighting, okay, which is at 3:29, which is of a 2011 to 2013. But now the FBI, based on Ann Taylor, the surveillance footage that they were gauging a lot of their stuff with that area in Moscow came from Ridge Road, wrong time, okay? Wrong time, wrong way. Just like the original stuff here, wrong time, wrong way. There's multiple cars, guys, that are out driving that look and are consistent with a 2014, a 2016, a 2011, a 2016, depending on how good the camera is. But none of these cars are going to Brian Kohlberger's apartment where he's getting out, and none of these cars are going to 1122 King where he's getting out and walking in. And so then we're looking at all this camera footage and we're able to find at 525 on Johnson Road, Ave Street. They botched it in the We go to this. Okay. And they're saying, oh my God, we got him coming back. We got this car coming back. Well, which car do you have coming back? Could it be completely a totally different car from either one of these? Yes. And what do you mean you coming back from fucking where? We have a car on Johnson Ave, Road Street at 525 that is consistent with what? One of these two, possibly even other ones that were like even before then. And then how many people on Johnson Road Ave, how many people drive a car like that? And then you're talking about that this is directly, if you take this, it's going to lead you directly back to West Palouse River Drive in Moscow, which intersects with Constagna Drive. Yeah, it leads you directly there. 100. So did you have a bunch of searches off this road on Johnson to search and see if he threw out bloody clothes, the knife? Did you have then if it's directly back to this area, then, and if he left at 4, that's an hour and 25 minutes. An hour and 25 minutes to travel 20 minutes. If this is just a direct, do you see him on any of the cameras going? And then they go like this. We were able to get a search warrant. On December 23, 2022, I applied for and was granted a search warrant for historical phone records. He was able to get 24 hours before, 24 hours after. I consulted with an FBI special agent that is certified, and there you go, CAST. Now, additionally, the FBI CAST special agent that I consulted with has over 15 years of federal law enforcement experience, which includes 6 years with the FBI. From information provided by CAST, I was able to determine estimated locations. Do you guys see this? I, as in Officer Payne, did this. From information provided by CAST, why didn't CAST do it? What information? And they're able, now again, this is all Payne. At approximately 2:42 a.m., this phone number was utilizing cellular resources that provide coverage to include his address. Awesome. At approximately 2:42, or at approximately 2:47 a.m., this phone then was utilizing resources that provide coverage southeast. And this is consistent with the phone leaving the Culver residence. Isn't it also consistent with other things? Yes. That answer is yes. And it is consistent with traveling south through Pullman, Washington. This is consistent with the movement of the white Elantra. Which white Elantra? Which white Elantra? Because the FBI agent that identified 5 different vehicles, which one? What is it consistent with? Is it consistent with the one at 243, the one at 252, the ones over in Moscow, Idaho, or the one at 5:25 a.m.? But the big thing is which one is it consistent with? The 2:44 or the 2:52 a.m.? Again, at approximately 2:47 a.m., the phone utilized cellular resources that provide coverage southeast of the Culver residence, consistent with the phone leaving the Culver residence and traveling south through Pullman. Perfect. This is consistent with the movement of the white Elantra. Well, now he's saying of the white Elantra, which is hilarious, but is it of the 2:44 a.m. or of the 2:53 a.m. vehicle? Do you know what the answer to that's going to be? Because the FBI is saying yes. Could those two can they be 2 different vehicles? Yes. So the 243 and 250, I'm sorry, 244 and 253 sightings, can those be 2 different vehicles? Yes. So Officer Payne, is it consistent with the one at 244 or is it consistent with the one at 253? At approximately 2:47 a.m., the phone stops reporting to the network, which is consistent with either the phone being in an area without cellular coverage, the connection to the network is disabled, such as putting the phone in airplane mode, or that the phone is turned off. The 8458 phone does not report to the network again until approximately 4:48 a.m. Isn't it true that before you were given this historical search warrant, that you believe that the time of the crimes were between 3 and 4 a.m.? No, you just told that to the public. Okay, that's cool. It doesn't matter, sure. Okay. So where was I? Okay. You say that it doesn't report again until 4:48 a.m., at which time it utilized cellular resources that provide coverage to Idaho, State Highway 95, south of Moscow, Idaho. It's near Blaine. And you're saying that it's north of Genesee, right? Now I have a question for you. I broke this down for you, so I was wondering if you could answer a question. You say that it leaves at 4:20 a.m. and it was at a high rate of speed, right? And you're saying that, just so you could see here, from 1122 King Road to Genesee, that is approximately 15.8 miles, traveling on 95 that you said it was consistent with. And that's a 20-minute trip, putting you at Genesee at 4:40 a.m., 20 minutes. But when it gets turned on at 4:48 a.m. or 4:47 a.m. It's just like outside of Blaine. Whereas if he's traveling and making this trip, when he turns it on at actually like 4:48, 4:47, he should be actually like past all of this if he's making like this loop, right? But isn't this cell tower, what else does it hit? Did you ever do like a radius to see where it hits? Could he be over here on that Johnson Avenue Street, that road Johnson, that you talk about here in your PCA? Have you ever seen Johnson? Where was it at? Right here, I believe. There you go. At 525, you're saying there's this white sedan, and this is a straight shot. Has this street ever been known to hit off of a tower in Blaine? Did you ever check that? Did you have any searches for the weapon then? Because to make the full loop around from leaving and coming back, it's actually less than this, but in order to try to make your whole thing work, it's putting this vehicle going through about, I don't know, 15 to 25 traffic cams. If this trip is an hour and 5 minutes and you left at 4:25 a.m., or I'm sorry, 5:25 a.m., leaving at 4:20 from the crime scene and being seen at the Johnson, what is it? The cameras over there, to make this whole thing happen. All right, it's an hour and 5 minutes to do that. And it has you being able to come, but it actually has you coming from the opposite direction of the camera where the camera says that it's coming from. That camera says it's going north, and this would have to have it coming south. But if you have to drive this and it takes you an hour and 5 minutes to get to this point, that means you can't make any stops to hide anything or get out and change, because this is going to take you an hour and 5 minutes to make this trip. Okay? You can't get out and hide anything. Also, if you're doing that, when the phone would have come back on at 4:47 or 4:48 a.m., it would have been over here, not over here where it's hitting off that cell tower. And also off of these little hotspots, there's those traffic cams. So where on these traffic cams were you able to find a vehicle that would be consistent with the 2014-2016 suspect vehicle 1? Did you find those on any of these cams out here? You know the traffic cams that I'm talking about, right? So in order to make this whole trip pop, you have an hour and 5 minutes to do it. You can't stop. Okay? But it also has you going the wrong way on a camera that is catching you on Johnson Ave by the Jehovah's Witnesses. So you, in fact, showed an FBI agent not realizing, I don't think, that the Johnson Ave camera is going the wrong way. We're coming from the wrong area. And how many white Elantras do people own in that area that are like on that street over there? The fact of the matter is that at 420, leaving up out of there at a high rate of speed and being able to be on a Blaine, Idaho tower, that puts you in this vicinity. At 448, 1122 King Road to Genesee's right off the exit, like at the exit where there is a camera, that's a 20-minute drive. That's where he should be. And what tower would he be paying off of there? What's that consistent with? So if he's all the way back here at 448 back here, how can he possibly make up the time needed to be on the Johnson 1300 Jehovah's Witness camera at 525? There's no way to physically make that time up. Again, 244 and 253. There's two different vehicles that are seen on the same camera. And the FBI is going to say that. There's no way to say that that is the same vehicle. And then at 525, what they're talking about here and this sighting, this is what Ann Taylor, I believe, is talking about. She is going to be able to show, yeah, the 525 one, that is Brian, isn't it? That is consistent with but it's not consistent with him making this fucking loop-de-loop that y'all are talking about. But now at 525, what car is it? Is it the 244 car or is it the 253 car? Meaning this. Right here, 2:44 a.m. FBI is going to say, yep, that's the vehicle that we were given on that camera. Then at 2:53, we looked at that vehicle. And now the question is, are those different vehicles? Can those be two different vehicles? And the answer is yes. And they're going different ways, aren't they? So it is consistent with them being two different vehicles. The one at 244 is heading away from 270. Isn't that correct? Yes. The one at 253, it's heading towards 270. Do you ever see it turn on 270? No. Do you know which way it's going on 270? No. Do you see any other cameras? Do they provide you with any other cameras? What's the next camera that you look at after 253? In Washington. And the answer is nada. So you just identified that there's two different vehicles there. One at 244, one at 253. And you did nothing to track down where this 244 a.m. sighting was between 244 and 253. Isn't it true probably that it does not fit your fucking narrative? There's two different vehicles. There's a total of 5 vehicles being identified in a PCA. And yet they want it to be that these 5 sightings are all the same vehicle. And that is not going to be able to be proven. In fact, I think it's going to blow up in their faces when they start talking about the years. Why does Officer Payne have the loop-de-loop happening? And Blaker says that Brian went straight home. Well, if Brian went straight home, then what? Then he came out again at 5:25 to be seen on that camera at 5:25. I mean, no camera has this vehicle ever leaving Steptoe, arriving at, getting out of anybody's vehicle, going into any house, going into his own apartment. And then they're going to hammer it with the exclamation point, which is, why in the PCA did you tell us that once you got the historical data and you did stuff, and you're talking about these pings, look at this, 5:27 a.m. It is consistent with what? The sighting of Johnson, right? Yeah. Yeah, but is it the 2:44 a.m. car or is it the 2:53 a.m. car? His phone is consistent with what? The ping of the one coming back in two, right? But you have two different vehicles leaving, 2:44 and 2:53. I think you have way more than that, by the way, but let's go right here. Then you want to talk about in the morning at 9 a.m. You're saying that he was in Moscow from 9:12 to 9:21. It is impossible to make that trip by 9:21 and to get back to his apartment by 9:32. That's 11 minutes. It is impossible to do. Like 100, you cannot do that in 11 minutes. Then you say that, hey, we also have to bring up this point, which is investigators found that the phone did connect to a cell phone tower that provides service to Moscow on November 14th. But investigators do not believe that the phone was in Moscow that day. What? Why? And so here then you're admitting that the pings are inaccurate. But why don't you believe that he was there? Where do you have him being? Oh, was he teaching a class in Pullman and he had a bunch of witnesses there taking a test from him? So he's in Pullman, probably teaching a class, right? But his phone's pinging in Moscow, right? So here you're showing that these pings are so inconsistent. Not to mention now we have 5 sightings of a vehicle. And the FBI are going to say that they could be all different vehicles. Do you understand that? The question's going to come out. Are you able to say that those vehicles are the same vehicle? And the answer to that is going to be no. And then the questions are going to be as to, well, were you able to track these vehicles back to Brian's address? There's all these cameras. Why didn't you go and get them? Did you get them? What do they show? No, they don't have anything there. Cars just can't appear in the middle of the street, you guys. Your car just can't appear in the middle of the street. I hate to break that to everybody, but that's just impossible, okay? But what Ann Taylor is going to be able to show is that her client was out that night and that it is consistent. And they talk about it right here. That the 5:25 stuff, all of this, that is consistent, right? But that 5:25 sighting is not consistent with this big fucking loop-de-loop that they say happened, as well as from where it was coming from. And you've also put in the PCA that then his phone just didn't have service for 3 hours the next day. And then you talk about how it was consistent with where it was the day before. What in the world are you talking about? There's no consistency in any of that because it's inconsistent. So you're consistently inconsistent. And that was the title of my live yesterday is, and then why would Officer Payne be doing any of this and not the expert? Because probably the FBI didn't want to fucking touch it. There is such a thing. For example, in the Rachel Del Tondo case, local law enforcement fucked it up so bad, I was told PSP, Pennsylvania State Police, they didn't want to touch it. That's how fucked up it was. Crime scene being contaminated, people doing shady things, pings not matching up, shit like that. Look at this. The phone does not report to the network again until approximately 4:48 a.m., at which time it utilized cellular resources that provide coverage to Idaho State Highway 95 south of Moscow, near Blaine. And I bet you if you put in Blaine to 1300 Johnson, I bet you would wind up arriving around 5:25, touching nowhere in Genesee or Union. You guys know that there's cameras all over there, right? Take a look. I'll show you. There you go. Look at all these cameras. Eight 2023 at 9:25 a.m. there. 3 hours behind me. Moscow, US 95, Palouse River Drive. See that? US 12. Line Street. Let's see what else we have. Oh, this is US 95 at D Street. US 195 at Washington 26. US 12 at Clark Street pavement. It's all out there in Uniontown. There we go. Anyways, Share screen, go back to my Google Earth. Okay. Step 2 apartments. First sighting of Brian Kober, Southeast Nevada Street. Again, see right here, this is north. That's north. So heading north. 244 heading north. Okay. 244 heading north. Look at that. And I just did a straight line here just to show you. But like obviously you can't just drive through buildings. Okay. So law enforcement does not have this car ever leaving Steptoe or arriving at Steptoe that night, correct? Correct. How many cameras are between these two locations? Did you check them? Were there any sightings? Now, taking us on over here. Again, Pullman's over there. Moscow's over here. The first sighting of Brian Kober, 700 block of Indian Hills, going away to possibly not get on any of these traffic cams. Now take a look at this. Right here, that's your Big Daddy traffic cam. This is the way, okay, that, let's see, where is it? I have to back up a little bit. Okay, take a look. See 700 Indian Hills right there? It's bigger. Okay. See my line over here? See that big old right there, X marks the spot? That's a traffic cam. There it is, traffic cam number 3. Okay. But what he's saying is over here, you're going to go, how does he get your 700 Indian Hills Drive? How are you going to get over there? What, go this way, try to come on, go over there, and then come back around like that, right? This PCA reads like Brian Kober was a Russian spy and knew where every traffic cam was and was able to avoid everything, but then got to the King Road neighborhood knowing that there was all these cameras and just was on every single one of them. All right. Sounds about right. So I'm just showing where, because the reason I'm showing these is because I found routes to possibly go that way. If you took back and through here, you'd be able to, you come this way to try to avoid stuff as well, but it's just, you know. But right here is where they plop down and say that this car is first seen, and it's on Indian Hills Drive. Well, where did this car come from? How can you say that this car is the same car that you saw at 244, or was it at 253? Which one is it? Oh, it's the same one from both of those. Oh, so how can you know that? Well, I don't, but I'm just saying. You understand this is how this is going to look in court? Does anybody understand this? How can you prove that Brian Kober is the car at 244? I can't. That's what the FBI is going to say. We can't. You don't see him in there, correct? Nope. And it's heading the other direction, correct? Yep. At 2:53, you see another one. But all they asked you is, was that consistent with the same model of what? What did they give you a stock image and say, is this what this is? Did they hand the FBI a stock image? What image did what did they give them? Look at that. And this is that's your camera. Look, coming back. Look at, see north, okay? Heading north. Back on out. They say came like this. See that? Blaine coming all the way out here. Is it possible that on this street and in back and through here that you'd hit off of that tower? Look at this. Look at that. This is the loop. Like what? How is this driving all through here the same as going like this? It's fucking not. Okay, guys, it's not. And if his phone has him all the way out over here, why don't you think they talk about what Brian Kohlberger was before 2:44 in the morning? Why don't they talk about where Brian Kohlberger was at, like, I don't know, 9 and 10, 11, and 12 and 13, like 13 at 1? Why don't they talk about that? Where was Brian Kohlberger from noon on Saturday until midnight and 1 and 2? What's up? Why aren't they talking about that? Again, let's just, here you go. Back to number 1 here. Stuck toe. No cameras, no cameras, no cameras. First camera sighting all the way over here. And at 2:44, but we're going north because this is north, red's north. North, we're heading north. Okay, how do you do that? Heading north. But this is also Nevada. So heading north. Heading north. Oh, wait, did they turn? Did they go this way? 2:44 a.m. PCA sighting of suspect vehicle 1. Take a look. All these possible, like, where are the cameras? This is his place over here. Nothing, nothing. First sighting. Now, don't you think it's odd that if you didn't get this until December 23rd to be able to do like the pings with the sightings, okay? So for example, if you were to have Brian's phone and have his estimated locations based off of these pings, then it would be a hell of a lot easier to then go in and be like, hey, look around this area at this time and try to find a white car. Versus, hey, start looking at cameras. Well, we have so many cameras. What do you mean start looking at cameras? Yeah, start looking at cameras at like 2 for like a white color car. What? what's the date you guys think that the FBI looked at the WSU cameras? Remember, because if you go by the PCA, when they say that, hey, we told WSU to be on the lookout for, white Elantra. Like, are you guys at all excited to find out about these dates on when everything that's listed in the PCA finally we get to find out these dates? You guys excited about that at all? Because I'm a date person and a timestamp person, and something can't come before something else. If that's how you can catch people in massive lies. The crunchy noise, by the way, you guys, it's called a mouse. This right here. It's a mouse. Can you fucking believe it? It's a mouse. Oh, shit. Anyways, I'm super excited to hear about some of these dates. Because we've been paying attention to the motions. It's like Ann Taylor's like, wait, what came first? The DNA? This white Elantra? Like, your investigation, what were you guys doing on different dates, Take a look at this then. So 244, you see something that looks like a 2014, 2016. Then the same area, you see 253, something looks like the same type of vehicle, but could it be two different vehicles? Yes. Then we're going to say that these vehicles, and there's no way to pinpoint them and show that they came from, there's nothing showing that they came from Washington, okay? Not a camera, nothing. Okay, nothing. But we're going to go ahead and say that we see a car at the 700 block of, there's a camera right there. But we see a car at the 700 block of Indian. I'm just showing you guys the opposite sides of Moscow. He would have had to know how to get away from all these cameras, okay? But he's going to show up at the 700 block, and lo and behold, he's going to be caught on the ring cam over there in the 700 block right here. Wow. And guys, guess what? So the 700 block ring camera, they're going to ask the FBI, did you ever look at this camera? Did you identify anything from this camera? Is that the same vehicle that you saw at 244? Is it the same vehicle that you saw at 253? Can it be completely different? Yes, 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 yes. Meaning, so now we're talking, like I said in the beginning of the show, 5 different sightings of different cars that are consistent with one of the most popular vehicles out there. Awesome. So what do you guys think? I want to hear what you think. Here is the link. And it has to be about what we're talking about right here, right now. Good. Thank you guys for being here at Truth and Transparency. Thank you, moderators. Thank you, subs, members. But Ann Taylor's going to use the 5:25 a.m. sighting on Johnson to blow up this case. like she said on cross-examination. Roxy says, I think it's at least 2 different vehicles. Well, I think that when you hear over and over from the FBI saying, and that, yeah, that's consistent with being 2 different vehicles going different ways. No, we don't have it on this. No, we didn't see that. No, we only use this. This is what we use. I mean, this is what, PCA is designed to get somebody arrested, okay? There you go. Oopsies. War Eagle says, I think you're on like white on rice. Yeah, and Nancy is going to have her own experts, okay? But these FBI guys, they didn't turn in their report until March 21st, 2023. You guys understand that, right? That means any report that they've given, there's no FBI report on anything until March. Canadian True Crime Buff, what is up? You mods rock. Thank you for all that you do. It's a struggle at times, I know. Keep up the good work. Oh, look at that. Bobby J, thank you. I guess I don't know why my mods are getting so much love. You know that when you have people trolling and hating, we're over here celebrating. You know what? They had months to get their story straight, but also what ended up happening is that they made the arrest of Brian Kober in that 7th week, and surveillance footage. You know, I don't know how long the traffic cams keep all that. I don't know. So, but what I do know is that there's been multiple, 244 or 253 or 244. Did you look at that footage? Okay, so you identified that it was consistent with what? 2014, 2016, white Hyundai Elantra. Okay, at 253, you looked at that footage. Yep. So 9 minutes later, another car that looks like that. Is it the same vehicle? I don't know. Why don't you know? Well, because we can't see the license plate. You can't see the back license plate on either one of them now. But how the fuck do we always get tickets around here? I'm just kidding. So they're going to have to say there's no, so it could be a different car. Can you see the driver? No. So that's the big thing, is at 244 and at 253, I'm going hard at showing that you just identified 2 different vehicles, okay? And that they're going the complete opposite way, right? At the same time, right about, right? Okay, perfect. Now you just identified 2 different vehicles, right? So then when we go and we show this, when you go and you say, okay, now let's go to the 700 block, right? When you go to the 700 block, you're going to ask this question. All right, so 326, what, is it the 2:44 a.m. vehicle, or is it the 2:53 a.m. vehicle that's at 326? Huh? What? Well, those could be technically 2 different vehicles, right? Yes. Okay, so on Indian Hills at 326, is it the 2:44 a.m. or the 2:53 a.m. car? It could be either one of those. But also, could it not be either one of those? Yes. So now we have 3 total sightings, because there's nothing tying that this vehicle is the same as these 2, or is one of them. So now we have 3 sightings, and it's across state lines, and you have no cameras before 326 244 and 253? Between that? No, not that I was given. Okay, well, how long does it take to get to that point? And then how many different cameras are there? Oh, there's a lot. There's a lot of businesses. There's a lot of traffic cams. You guys couldn't find anything on those? No. Did you guys ask? Were you given any? When were you given the footage on 700? When were you given this footage of the 700 block? I want the dates of all of these footages. Then we go, now you got 326, then you're going to have another sighting at 327. You see how it should be? Then 329. Okay, so you're like boom to boom to boom to put them at the 329. Now the question is okay, back to the same question. Is the 329 sighting, what footage are you going off of? Please don't tell me you're going off of the Linda Lane spin around with headlights. Please tell me that's not the footage you're using. And why would you ever think that the 329, remember the one in Moscow originally was what? Oh, that's a 2011 and 2013. So now I get to interview or AKA cross-examine an FBI agent that just identified, again, 2 different vehicles. Wait, say it ain't so, Joe. Wait a second. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I identified this vehicle as a 2011 to 13. Okay. So that couldn't be either one of these, right? Because you identified those as being a 2014 to 2016, right? So then that couldn't be this vehicle, right? I mean, do you guys see how fucking wild this is? Oh, wait, but what vehicle? That's not the one I used. I didn't use the one at the 700 block. They gave me one off of like Ridge Road. Oh, they did? What's the timestamp of that and the date of that? Oh, I don't know. I didn't even look at that. My job was just to identify the vehicle. Okay. And let's see. I think it's right here in your report. Yep, 2011 to 2013. That's what you identified. Why? So like these right here, were you given any of these videos? All these swoop-de-loop-dies? No. Mine was like Walenta, Ridge Road. That's where the majority of my stuff came from. The fuck? You guys understand that this is how this is going to go, right? Let's see. So, right here. Suspect vehicle 1 is next seen departing the area approximately 4:20 a.m. at a high rate of speed. Suspect vehicle 1 is next observed traveling southbound on Walenta Drive. Okay. So, based on my knowledge of the area and review of camera footage in the neighborhood that does not show suspect vehicle 1, so you searched every camera from what? Every street? Well, we asked the community to provide those for us, and we reviewed them, and we even wanted if they didn't have any, sightings, because that meant that the car didn't go past there. Oh, that's what that means? So your Ring camera picks you up every time that you drive? No, the answer to that is no fucking way. It doesn't. Okay? I don't know who you're going to fucking say that to, and anybody's going to believe that, but that's just not true. But yeah, during this time frame, we couldn't find the vehicle, so therefore we eliminated all those roads that he could have possibly traveled on. Okay, that sounds fucking like a great idea. So then, we just figured he likely exited the neighborhood at Palouse River Drive and Castagna Drive. Palouse River Drive is the southern edge of Moscow and proceeds into Whitman County, Washington. Exactly. And isn't there a camera there? There's a camera there. Isn't there? Did that camera, that traffic cam, get him? No businesses? You know, actually, we didn't get to it fast enough. It was deleted. What? Isn't it true you can't identify any vehicles on any of these cameras, but nor can you identify a person in any of these vehicles? That's correct. No. All Ann Taylor's going to do is, well, did they ever show you cars? Hey, is this the same as that car? Well, it's consistent with having the same things, but without the license plate, I mean, I can't say with 100% certainty. It says for approximately the next 10 miles from Moscow, you know, both Pullman and Moscow are very small college towns, and people commonly travel back and forth between them. So, Officer Payne and Officer Blaker, you said that it's common for people to go, you know, to both campuses, right? Right? It's common. So then why were you blown away that Brian would have went and been paying on 12 different times in a 3-month period on cell towers in Moscow? If it's so fucking common, why would that concern you? That 12 pings. Does Pullman and Moscow have the same type of shopping, like, you know, Walmart, Marshalls, TJ Maxx? And just to be clear, every time that you pulled over Brian Kohlberger, he was by himself, isn't that correct? Which is consistent with him saying that he drives alone and travels around alone, isn't that correct? How come on every time that Brian Kohlberger got pulled over, you guys did not give him a ticket? He's just a nice guy. I know said he didn't get a ticket when he went left after it was red. Did you give him a ticket, the Duke pullover? Okay. How many white Hyundai Elantras are owned by the inner circle? Who else owns white Hyundai Elantras that meet that criteria? How were they excluded? Were they excluded by their cell phone pings and tings and bada bings? Well, they're just, aren't those pinging too? Aren't their cell phones pinging as well? Officer Blaker, Officer Payne, there's this guy in a hoodie that's, I don't know, following these girls. They just ditch him. What kind of car does he have? Where was his phone pinging? What about the ex-boyfriends? What about these people that were Venmoing and paying for stuff at 3:33 in the morning? What about these people that are always wearing masks? What about these people always dressing and scaring each other and chasing each other with, I don't know, weapons? Why did you think the time of the crime was 3 to 4 and then in the PCA it's 4 to 4:25? Isn't it because it doesn't fit my client's driving pattern? Isn't it true that even if the sheath didn't have the DNA on it, you would have still tried to arrest Brian Kohlberger if you even take away the DNA? Why didn't you use the sheath DNA to obtain any of the search warrants? Isn't it true that you needed that DNA to be able to arrest Brian Kohlberger? Let's see what else. Were you able to find any evidence that Brian Koberger knew any of these people? So, no social media connections. Now, my client tells you that he was driving in this vehicle all night, right? And you strip searched that vehicle. Were you able to find any DNA in that car? How about his apartment? Were you able to find any DNA? How about all of his, electronics? So my client admits to being in his car driving the evening during when these alleged homicides occurred, and knowing on how important this vehicle would be for your case, you were able to uncover that my client had this vehicle on 11/29, and you never thought to ask this PhD student if he would cooperate and let you search that car on 11/29. But meanwhile, you were asking other people that knew who these victims were to just turn over their phones and their DNAs, and you had no problem telling them. I mean, why would anybody need to be submitting DNA? They would have to know that DNA was found at the scene. Isn't that correct? Why would you be asking for people's DNA if there was no DNA? So you're asking these people for DNA. So you put it out there, even after the fact that you put it out to the public on 11 or on 12/7 or 12/8, Brian Koberger was still in Washington, and you're looking for this vehicle. Knowing on how important this vehicle is and what type of evidence could be in it, you at no point thought it was important to get your hands on that? Or were you just going to monitor him to see if he was going to clean it, do anything to it? Were you able to monitor his movements? Did you see him washing this car at all? Was he, bleaching it? Was he anal bleaching? Was he bleaching his vehicle?
Don't say anal bleaching, I got some
Documents. So, and what was that again? So he's driving around in this vehicle. You think that he stabs 4 individuals brutally, and the 2 with massive, defensive wounds, and gets in this vehicle, and there's no trace of anything in this vehicle that he is admitting to driving around all evening into the early morning hours because he can't sleep. You see that he owns this, and you don't think to yourself, we need to get in that car. Let's just ask this man if he'll allow us to search his vehicle. Let's ask this man if he will give his DNA up. But yet we're going to ask all the frats and the sororities to give up their DNA, and they're just handing it over. Hey, will you give us your phones? And they're just handing it over. So why can't we go to a guy who was clearly wanted to work for the police, wanted to, he's a PhD student, for heaven's sakes. He's a big fucking nerd. Go ask him if, hey, we're going around, we're asking people that have cars. We did a registration poll. You have a white Elantra. Can you tell us where you were that night? Are we able to take a look inside? And this is the thing is someone says well, no, if I'm investigating this case, I'm not going to tell and let somebody know that we're onto them. Well, you had no problem asking Jack D to submit his firstborn. You had no problem asking the fraternities and sororities to do all of these things. I mean, is that letting you know that you're onto them? The question is why, if you found this car on 11/29, didn't you do anything about getting into the vehicle? The methods that you use with Brian Koberger aren't the same as the methods that you used with other persons of interests. Isn't that correct? You made what was this whole thing? This tree, this genealogy. You have other DNAs that are in that house, belong to males, are unidentified. Do we start trees for them? Family trees, we got to get this DNA going. Why didn't you use Kaylee and Maddie's phones to determine the time of the crime? Why didn't you use Xana or Ethan's to determine the time of the crime? Why did you only use the 2 surviving witnesses' phones in terms of digital information, as well as only what Dylan said to determine that the time of the crime happened between 4 and 4:25? Isn't it because if you use the other information that it clashes with your narrative? Isn't it possible that Kaylee didn't use her phone again at 2:52 because Kaylee was dead? Same with Maddie. Is it possible? Isn't it also possible that they were sleeping? Were Maddie and Kaylee sleeping in the same bed when they went to bed? Did they start in the same bedroom?
That's a great question, actually.
How can you determine if they started in the same bedroom? Is it because one of the witnesses said that you put in the PCA that everybody was home by 2 and they were all in their rooms by 4? Well, that would put Kaylee and Maddie in separate bedrooms. Now, you've had a lot of problems with this house in the past, isn't that correct? A lot of noise complaints. What other issues? Any complaints of drug use? Now, you guys went there for a noise complaint September 1st, isn't that correct? Did anybody that lived in that home, did they come to the door? Did you physically meet anybody that lived in that home on September 1st, 2022? Did they ever come to the door? You guys were there twice. Did you ever talk to a homeowner either time? Well, yes, we talked to Xana the later time. Okay, and then earlier? No, we did not. So you had a house full of people in that home that were partying, screaming. You're pouring out Trulies, right? Trulies for the win, pouring them out. Okay. And I think it was you, Blaker. Yeah. And Payne, you both were there. You had a ride along too. Isn't that correct?
What's his name?
Who's the ride along? So these boys that you were asking these questions to, were they telling you the truth? They mentioned that the girls were no longer in sororities. They mentioned that one of them belonged to this sorority fraternity. That if you were to go through that body cam footage, were they ever at all not truthful with you? How do you know that none of the people that were home were actually not home and they were not there? How do you know that? Could they have been lying to you? Did you ever search the towers on their phones to see where they were pinging that night? Where were the cell phone pings coming from on September 1st and August 31st for the people that lived in that house? Where were their phones pinging? Were they consistent with being at 1122 King? They were, weren't they? So these people were lying to you? Everybody was home? Did you ever check to see if they were actually at Corner Club or? So you could actually be pinging at 1122 King Road, like meaning like service was provided there, but you could actually be somewhere else, like the corner club, right? And so these people had a history of, I guess you could say, throwing parties, people not knowing who's in, who's leaving, all those things. But they also have like a history of not being truthful to the police department. Is that correct too? So then how are you able to determine that they were being truthful to you when you were interviewing them? They told multiple stories. Isn't it true that Bethany and Dylan have different stories? Why aren't you using Bethany's story? Why aren't you using Bethany's phone? And then Xana being on TikTok at 412, you do realize that TikTok just runs. Are you aware of that? That once you watch one video on TikTok, it just will either keep playing that video or like if you swipe it, it just continues to run. Are you aware of that? So you said that it was consistent at 412 that Xana was on her phone with TikTok. When did Xana start using the TikTok application that night though? Was she using it for like an hour, 2 hours? How come in Bethany or Dylan's story they never talked about the dog ever barking? Would that be consistent with somebody knowing the dog for the dog not to bark? Why is Mr. Gonsalves saying that their wounds didn't match? That Maddie and Kaylee had their points of damage didn't match. Where is he getting that information from? Do you think he just made that up? So if Maddie and Kaylee and Ethan and Xana and Bethany and Dylan are out and about and they just let people be at their house when they're not home, isn't it then totally possible that on the night of 11/12 going into 11/13 that the same type of occurrence happened, that they had people at their house that they didn't even know that were there? Isn't that like a normal thing? And you didn't seem to kick them out the last time that happened. So it's possible that there were people in that house that nobody knew about that could have been waiting in there. Were you the ones that decided to say that the roommates were sleeping downstairs? Or did they tell you that? Did that come out in an interview, or did you guys just whip that up? And now it says that you actually looked at body cam footage to find out where the dog was when your first responding officers arrived, and that you were able to look at the body cam footage of Nunez, and you're able to see that Kaylee's dog was actually in her room. Don't dogs usually follow their owners? So if Kaylee was to get up and leave out of that bedroom, wouldn't the dog follow? Do you know if when you interviewed Jack D, does Murphy have a habit of sleeping in bed with the owners or sleeping in a crate? Was there a crate there? When you interviewed any of these witnesses, what was Murphy's normal sleep patterns? Where would Murphy sleep? Was it normal for Maddie and Kaylee to pick a twin size bed to sleep in and then put their dog, or her dog rather, in her room with a queen bed and shut the door and leave the dog in there while those two slept in a single bed? Did you interview any of the roommates to ask if that's how they would normally sleep? What did Adam hear from Maddie? Why did you originally think that the time of the crime was between 3 and 4 a.m.? How long have you been an officer? 2 years. Have you ever worked a murder? Have you ever been the lead investigator, Officer Payne, on a murder? Did ISP help you with this timeline? Who are those ISP officers? Tolson? Van Leuven? Why doesn't your body cam show the sheath? Why doesn't anybody's body cam show the sheath? You said that you physically later noticed right here. As I entered this bedroom, I could see 2 females in the single bed in the room. Both Gonsalves and Mogan were deceased. How did you know that it was Kaylee in Maddie's bed? How are you able to identify that was Kaylee? Couldn't have been a different friend that was spending the night? Especially if Kaylee's dog was in her room. Was that coughed up by one of the roommates? How would the roommates know where they were sleeping? But yet they both said they went to their separate bedrooms. Is it because they saw them after the crime and noticed that they were both in the same room? Boom. I noticed that you put, when you were describing other people, you had to wait and get identification. You saw somebody's, ID later identified as this. But when it came to Maddie and Kaylee, you knew who they were. But Maddie could have had, especially since Kaylee had her own bedroom, how are you able to identify that was Kaylee? But right here it says that you were visible stab wounds. I also later noticed what appeared to be a tan leather knife sheath laying on the bed next to Mogan's right side. And the only reason you put that in parentheses, when viewed from the door, it's not that you viewed it from the door. You were just trying to explain what the right side was. Because the right side to the actually person is opposite. Isn't that correct? So I also later noticed what appeared to be, you noticed it, but yet your body cam, and for the matter, nobody's body cam, has that tan leather sheath. And yet Blaker says that he was notified by ISP about the tan leather sheath. Isn't it true, Officer Payne, that you never saw that sheath there that day? Who bagged and tagged the sheath? How many pictures were taken of the sheath at the crime scene? Now, you said that you were able to see that it was tan. It was tan. Is that because there was no blood on it? Did you see any blood on it? Was there any blood on it? You didn't tell Blaker? How come when you're talking on and walking through, there's never once in the whole time that you're on your body cam, do you ever mention seeing this? You never talk about it. You say that numerous interviews were conducted by all the different agencies, and 2 of the interviews included the 2 surviving witnesses. Were they ever suspects? Isn't it true that the family was concerned why they weren't considered suspects? Was the door unlocked to the house between the hours of 9 or 10 p.m. and 1:30? Was the house locked so anybody could come in? And it was normal for people to just come and go and be there and party when nobody was home. Isn't that correct? It's not? Well, let's just play this tape right here. I think these are your officers talking, and they actually were told that nobody was home. Nobody that lived there was home. Did you stop them? Did you prevent them from partying? They just continued on. Isn't that correct? You just decided to pour out the Trulies. Is that what you guys did instead? You figured that we'll just pour these Trulies out? Okay. Did you believe them when they said that nobody was there? And so it's normal for people to party in houses without the owner's home, and you guys are on site and you guys have no problem with that. Now, how would you know if somebody was incapacitated and possibly being raped in the house? Would you know that? So what would have happened if there would have been a rape that night? So when they told you that nobody was home, that lived there, you just believe them. Isn't that correct? Is that normal? Do you guys go to houses and you're there for a noise complaint and there's nobody that lives there that's home causing a finable offense? You just say, okay, well, get them on the phone. And then they hand you a phone and they just tell you, oh, this is one of the owners or one of the renters. They didn't ask for any of her number or anything because you guys went back there and you didn't have the number, did you? Okay, just making sure. So then anybody could have been in that house all night, right? Okay. And then did DoorDash leave the food by the door? Or did the DoorDash, where was it from? Who ordered it? When was it ordered? Because you're very specific here when you say that this was the exception of Cornado who received a DoorDash. But did she actually make the order? You know, you can receive a DoorDash. And I noticed that you guys put in for your search warrant with DoorDash that you wanted to know, you didn't go after Xana's DoorDash. You went after the address 1122 King Road, and you wanted to know any DoorDash that had ever been delivered to that address, and you took it all the way back a year. Isn't that correct? So who, in fact, ordered the DoorDash? And do you know if she actually received it? And then I noticed that you put in here that DM stated she originally went to sleep in her bedroom on the southeast side of the second floor. Okay. And this is what kind of gets me tossed up. DM stated she was awoken. So that means that she was sleeping, right? So let me ask you this question then. How can everybody be home and in their beds at 2 and asleep or at least in their rooms by approximately 4 a.m.? Obviously, that couldn't have been brought to your attention by one of the deceased victims. So this whole thing of at least in their rooms by approximately 4 a.m., this had to come from either Bethany or Dylan. Isn't that correct? And if Dylan was sleeping because she was awoken, okay, DM stated she was awoken at approximately 4 a.m. Well, I've never met anybody that goes to sleep and wakes up at the same time. Have you? So is it safe to say that Bethany was the one that said everybody was home by 2 and in their rooms by 4? Because how could Dylan say that if she was sleeping? Normally, if I'm the last person out in the living room, yep, I shut off all the lights. I went to bed. So I went to bed at, 4. So that means, everybody else had to nobody else was out there at 4. It had to be somebody to speak like that. Okay. Okay, so let's continue here with this one then. And then this is where I got to hand it to you here, Payne. I got a question. Normally what you do is you listen to what the, I guess you could say the witness tells you, and that's what it is. But here, you decide to take what Dylan says, which is it sounded like Kaylee playing with her dog in one of the upstairs bedrooms. That's what she was awoken at approximately 4 a.m. by what sounded like Kaylee playing with her dog, she was located on the 3rd floor. A short time later, DM said she heard who she thought was Kaylee say something to the effect of, "There's someone here." Okay. And then you decide to then say, well, even though my witness says she heard Kaylee, a review of records obtained from a forensic download of Xana's phone showed this could also have been Xana. So do you believe that Xana was upstairs playing with Kaylee's dog? Because if Dylan's on the second floor and she hears, a stampede type thing, like you're hearing noises from up above, okay? I guess I just want you to explain to me why you wanted to let us know that this also could have been Xana awake and using TikTok app at approximately 4:12 a.m. Well, Payne, what in the fuck does that actually have anything to do with what your witness heard? Your witness heard Kaylee's voice. Kaylee. And this would put everything, okay, because Kaylee was on the phone, trying to call Jack D up until 2:52. Isn't that correct? Okay. So could this actually be at 3? Because I think that's what your hang-up was, Payne. Because how could Kaylee be awake from 2:52 a.m. and then start playing with her dog at 4? Like, what was Kaylee doing if she wasn't on her phone for an hour and 8 minutes, right? But then also, Dylan knows the voices of her roommates. But why did you feel the need to put this in here? How does that arrest Brian Kohlberger by talking about this in a PCA to arrest Brian Kohlberger? What does what fucking Dylan heard from either Kaylee or Xana have to do with arresting Brian Kohlberger? And my question is, are you putting Xana upstairs in the room playing with Kaylee's dog? Did she hear this noise? If she's hearing the dog and the dog was upstairs, or are you trying to say that the dog was downstairs? Where was the dog? So wait, let me ask you this then. You know how TikTok works, right? They could just keep on replaying. How long? She was awake and using the TikTok app at probably 4:12 a.m. How long did it show that she was still on the TikTok app for? So if by your logic, sir, if the TikTok app is on, that means she's alive. So if the TikTok app is on for hours afterwards, she's alive. If it's on for hours after 4 o'clock to 4:25, if TikTok is moving after that time, then she's alive based on your logic. But I feel like there's a reason that at 4 o'clock you can't say that it would have been her hearing Kaylee, because then I think you're going to probably have to explain what Kaylee was doing for an hour and 10 minutes, but not using her phone. Like, what person does that if she's awake? Right? Oh, but that's right. You're only using the phone data from the surviving witnesses and only using Dylan's words. Why would that be? Well, because everything else, Lana, it's totally clashing. It totally does not support. Is it putting people alive? So again, if Dylan's sleeping at 4, she was awoken at 4. That means she couldn't have gone to bed at 4. It's just not possible. So it was Bethany who told you all of this stuff, that everybody was in their rooms by 4. And where are you getting this from? How about this? Who else was there? We get that everybody was in their rooms, but who was with them? Well, we don't know. I don't know. Well, people are in there all the time, right? So they could be with people, right? Okay, so here we go. And then this is where we get into all of these opening and closings of the door, and then the sighting. You make a point to say that, again, Dylan opened the door for the third time. So she's opening and closing doors. Meanwhile, there's a murderer in the house. They can't hear these opening and door closings, okay? She heard the crying and saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking toward her.
But not her.
If somebody is walking towards her and she's in her room, they'd be coming from the kitchen. You're aware of that, right? How could you be walking towards somebody the way that Dylan's door is? If the door's open, would she have to then step out of the door? So if she was to take one step out, there would be one footprint out, right? If she only took one step out of the door and then became frozen, the other footprint wouldn't then get out into that area, so there would just be one footprint. Isn't that true? But I don't know how in the world you're going to say somebody was walking towards you with the way that Dylan's door was. You'd be coming from the kitchen unless Dylan stepped out of her room.
In the hallway?
Now, did Dylan say that she heard anybody running up and down the stairs? How was Brian Kohlberger getting upstairs and downstairs? She didn't hear anybody running up the steps? Okay. Now let me ask you this. Did Dylan say that she stepped out of the hall? Does Dylan own any Vans? What size shoe does Dylan wear? What size shoe is that print? Oh, it's just a halvesy print? So was my client walking on one foot, hopping around with half of a sole? You put it in a PCA because you're trying to arrest Brian Kohlberger. So was the print a match to Brian? Now this is where it becomes objective. Dylan describes the figure to be 5'10" or taller. Subjective. Male, not very muscular, but athletically built with bushy eyebrows. Okay. And now, is it normal for you? Have you ever heard in your life of being a cop that somebody sees a man in a mask they do not recognize and that they do not call the police? No, she was just frozen. Okay. But that wasn't my question. My question is, has anybody ever said to you, hey, I was going to call the cops 9 hours ago, but I was in a frozen shock state and I couldn't use the phone, but now I'm going to call the cops and tell them this story? Has it ever happened to you before? Of them seeing an alleged intruder? Okay. No, that's never happened to you before? So this is a first, right? Okay. Well, I have another question then. Dylan didn't call 911 that night, nor did she call 911 that morning. So she would have never called 911 because it was somebody else calling 911. And how would you know that Dylan, it was a male? Did she see a penis? I'm just curious. So could it be a female? Okay. So it could be a female. The male walked towards the back sliding glass door. Okay. Do you understand have you just taken a look at the blueprint of that house? In order for Dylan to have stepped out and to see, she would have been partially in the hallway, and they would have actually had to collide. Like, are you saying that he was coming from the living room, coming from upstairs? Where did Dylan say when walking towards her and then walking towards her? But where was he coming from? Depending on where she's located, that's the whole towards me. Like, where was she? But Dylan remembered all of these specific details after being in shock. No, we had to interview her a bunch. So she has a bunch of different statements. Okay, just making sure. But then you also include this. After seeing the mail, DM did not state that she recognized the mail. Isn't that because somebody else did state that they recognized the mail? What did Bethany state? So DM stating that she didn't recognize this person is the reason that then leads you to believe that the murderer left the scene because Dylan didn't recognize somebody in a mask? And this all happened between 4 and 4:25, but it was Dylan that said that she heard Kaylee playing with the dog, not Xana. But you want to interfere and say that, it could have also been Xana. Well, did she say that, or why would it be? Why are you making that it could have been? You don't believe her there, but you believe her here? She's confused then, but she's not confused. My question is are you alluding to the fact that you think Kaylee's already dead and that it can't be her? Because normally you just take what the witness says and you just say that. Now, the combination of DM statements to law enforcement, reviews of forensic downloads of records from BF and DM's phone, and video of a suspect video, as described below, leads investigators to believe the homicides occurred between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. Now, isn't it true that if you take in account other things, such as the survivor or the deceased victims, that it would lead you to believe that they were still alive past that point? Is there anything that indicates that they were killed before 4 a.m.? So you believed this whole time that the crime had to have happened after 4, but yet you told the public from day 1 that the crimes happened between 3 and 4? No, isn't it true that you started moving that time frame based off of pings? You would have had these cameras that would have shown from 1112 right away, didn't you? Oh, it states here that you guys didn't start looking at those cameras until after the 18th of November. This crime happened on November 12th going into the 13th, and you don't start looking at the cameras that are at 1112 until the November 18th. Can you help me explain why that you wouldn't start looking at those cameras until from 1112 until November 18th? Why don't you believe this is a crime that was a targeted isolated crime. How many cameras, when you went out to do your canvassing, how many cameras did you go to their place and they tell you that it was already too late to obtain anything from it, that it had already been, written over or recorded over? Officer Payne, what would lead you to believe that, and when did you get this footage from this 700 block of Indian Hills? And you reviewed this camera footage and you believe that it was a white sedan? Did you ever provide that to the FBI for them to determine what that was? And it was traveling westbound. Okay. Now, normally what people will do is, if it was traveling westbound, did you try to go get camera footage like from like the neighbors? Did they have Ring cameras, or like streets over and stuff like that? Were you able to find this vehicle coming from like just a couple minutes prior to that? So is it possible that this car came out of a driveway on Indian Hills Drive? Is it possible? If you couldn't find anything that had this car, could it have been coming out of one of the driveways on Indian Hills Drive? Do you know who lives on Indian Hills Drive? Does anybody with any ties to the 1122 King Road house live on Indian Hills Drive, rather? Are there anybody that owns any white Elantras living on that street? Were you aware of a gentleman that coaches a softball team, or I'm sorry, a little league baseball team that lives on that street? The Cars. Did they have any links to the 1122 King Road house? They own a big white pickup truck. The dad does. Is Emma Bailey's family? How about Cindy Burkhart? Oh, didn't Cindy Burkhart's stepson live at the 1122 King Road house? Does she live on that road? Has she ever lived on that road? Just a couple more questions here from you, Officer Payne. You wrote here that on this video, right there, it appeared suspect vehicle 1 was not displaying a front license plate. Now, call me crazy, but I would think that if that was the case with these other videos, you would probably say that, right? So on this video, it appeared suspect vehicle 1 was not displaying a front license plate. And that would be the Steiner Ave sighting, which was just 2 minutes from the 326 Indian Hills. But that's the video that you're saying. On this video, it appeared. Was it the FBI that made that, or was that your? Because I know you consulted with them. Who determined that there was no right there? Who determined that? So the FBI never said that. Isn't that correct? And now, is this the vehicle that they identified as a 2011 to 2013? So the 2011 to 2013 without the license plate equals which one again? The one in Moscow right here at 328. That's the 2011, 2013 that is without. And what type of vehicle does my client have? 2015? Okay, just making sure. And then how long was Brian Koberger a resident of Washington? 3 months. So in 3 months, he was able to determine where all the traffic cams were, okay, in Moscow and in Pullman, as well as out driving along on these, back highway streets. And you say that he was at the residence or driving around 12 different times. It was pinging. And just want to make sure I'm correct here. And so you think that he avoided every camera, traffic cam, but you think that he was just circling the crime scene minutes after minutes after minutes, knowing that there's all these cameras there? Is that what you think? Just making sure. So he doesn't give a fuck about any of the traffic cams, any of the government cams, because he did his homework and he knows where all of those are. Then he just decides, I'm not going to do my homework around the crime scene or the house itself, and be seen on all of those cams, but avoid every other camera. Okay, just making sure that we got that right. Okay. And 404. Now, question for you. Suspect vehicle 1 can be seen entering the area of 4 time approximately 404. Okay. Was this before or after Dylan heard Kaylee saying that there was someone here? Was this before or after? Is this before or after Kaylee was playing with her dog at 4? Because whoever's driving this car isn't in the house yet. Is that correct? Where did this car park? You talk about it's making all these, but you never talk about it actually parking and somebody getting out of it. Do you ever see that happen? No. Okay. Isn't it true that King Road House 1122 is known for drugs and partying? Isn't it normal that people would drop off drugs or pick up drugs from this house? And in order to do that, did you ever interview anybody and they would talk about how they did that? Would their drug dealers or whoever had the drugs, would they come to the house? Would they have to go out and meet the people? How does that work? Did you ever ask Emma Bailey or D, how they did that? Did you ever ask Sigma Chi how they obtained their drugs? Did you ever ask anybody if they were partying, where they got their drugs from? Now, you had these officers that were undercover. Did any of them say to you that they saw this white Hyundai Elantra just, I don't know, circling all over the place that night, looking suspicious? No, they never said that? So we don't see this car park. We don't see anybody get out of it. It's a 2011 to 2013, not the make and model of Brian Kohlberger's. So isn't that the reason that you didn't, I don't know, show the FBI? Like, what camera did you show the FBI where they came back and said, yeah, this one is the 2014, 2016. Oh, that's the one off of Ridge Walenta? Do you understand where my hang up here is? This is a 2011, 2013 vehicle. So then you went and got a car that was traveling away in the wrong direction of the crime scene to have the FBI come back and say, okay, that could be a 2014 to 2016. Meanwhile, this vehicle is just plopped down in the middle of fucking Indian Hill Drive, and we're supposed to say that that's Brian Kohlberger? I don't understand how you're saying that a car that's in the middle of Indian Hill at 3:26 a.m. is Brian Kohlberger's car. How? I'm just trying to understand how this is going to happen in a courtroom where you're going to be able to say that this random vehicle that shows up that is consistent with a 2011, 2013 in the middle of the road is Brian Kohlberger's. And that you believe that Blaker says that Brian went straight home, and Payne, you're saying that Brian went for a complete joyride all over here. Because why? Oh, because you got a hold of his historical data, and you're like, oh, fucking shit. He didn't go straight home. How do we make it so this is this dude? Everybody thought that Brian Kohlberger has a shitty ass alibi because he says he was out driving, okay, in the middle of fucking Idaho and Washington with no service half the time. Well, I'm flipping the script, and I'm going to, and what I've just showed here today on this live is that the police had the capability to go talk to him to try to get into that car on 11/29 or right shortly after. They didn't. Like, they did not. They went and got DNA from the frats, cell phones from all these people, downloaded them. But you're not going to go get the car. You're also going to say that 5 to 6 to 7, because we're not even talking about the cars that are seen on those gas stations that the media use, okay? There's all these different sightings of this vehicle. And there's only one camera where they're saying that it looks like the license plate. There is no license plate. That is not said anywhere else, guys. Nowhere else in any of this. Well, then it totally looks like the car that you're talking about over there on Steiner, Indian Hills, is a completely different car from Washington, which tells me everything that I've been saying, which is which car, 2:44 a.m. or 2:53 a.m. is Brian Kohlberger's, because I believe that it is quite possible that one of those is his car, and that the car coming back at 5:25 and I'm able to, like, you know, do the minute by minute, okay, that is Brian Kohlberger. But that path is nothing to do with this. Absolutely nothing. There is no physical evidence in 18 pages, except for a sheath that Officer Payne says that he fucking saw, that no body cam has footage of. And that they're saying was underneath the body and the comforter. So how did you see it unless you were, I don't know, messing around with the crime scene? Or unless you were the one that planted it. Or unless you know the person that put it there and where they put it. There's no way that I am on a jury and have a guy up there who says that he saw a sheath, okay, only to later find out that it was under the body and under the comforter. How could you have seen that? You can't. He can't undo this. You cannot undo saying those words. You also can't undo the fact that there are 6 to 7 different vehicles. And the one big one that everyone's slipping out about is a 2011 to 2013 without a front license plate. That's your big daddy right here. And that is how Ann's going to cross them up, because this is the one that is not displaying the front license plate. This is the only time it's talked about, and that's the one that's a 2011, 2013. There was no other times that is being talked about like that. This is a completely different car. 100. And guess what? Even if it was the same car, you can't just plop it down and say, okay, no, look at here, it is right here. What? Like, how did it get from this point to that point? No other cameras have it. But now you get to throw the trump card down, which is boom, it's a 2011, 2013. It's not the same car as what was seen in Washington. Because you have to get Brian Kohlberger the fuck up out of Washington. So was he in the 244 car or was he in the 253 car? Because those are 2 different vehicles. And that's what you're going to hear the FBI say. When they say, could it be 2 different vehicles? And the answer to that is yes. And then when Bethany tells you guys that this shit happened and started happening at 3, which to me is consistent with Kaylee and Maddie's phones never being used again after 252. I don't know how anybody can look at this PCA and think that people were being honest. Also, I don't know how anybody could look at this and think that it makes a fucking lick of sense. And you know what's sad to me is that let's say that Brian Kober is guilty. Y'all fucked up so bad that he could walk. That's what would be such a travesty, right? Hey, Dawn Daniels, why didn't you use the sheath to obtain a search warrant into Brian Kober's apartment? Well, because I didn't want it to get thrown out later. Why would it get thrown out? Well, because how we obtained it all was just really, we just didn't want any problems. Why would you think there were going to be problems? That's just unheard of. Why didn't Pennsylvania use the sheath to obtain the search warrant of Brian Kober's parents' house? Why was the only person that used the sheath Payne, and that was for the arrest of Brian Kober, which led to getting his DNA? So the only way that you had the DNA of Brian Kober to compare it to your fucking DNA is by Payne putting it in this PCA on page 18 to obtain the arrest, which then led to the DNA. Right here. That's the only way you got his DNA. On December 27, 2022, Pennsylvania agents, and it wasn't PSP, recovered the trash from Koberger family residence located in Albert, Pennsylvania. The evidence was sent to the Idaho State Lab for testing. On December 28th, the Idaho State Lab reported that a DNA profile obtained from the trash and the DNA profile obtained from the sheath identified a male as not being excluded. This is the probable cause affidavit for the arrest, which then led to the buccal swabs of Brian Koberger. This was only used in this to obtain the arrest of him. They never used this, and this is why Anne's saying that 100, we're going to get everything to do with that. Because how you were able to come to this fucking conclusion, which was everything to do with this, when you created this, and how you think that you did this in a day, I laugh. You only had this because the FBI was able to create this tree. And out of this whole tree that they created from the DNA that was allegedly on the sheath, okay, that's how it led back to allowing this to happen. Reva says BK was handed to law enforcement on a plate. The investigation is built up around him, but he was named before any 2015 Elantra entered the investigation. Well, that's what Ann Taylor was trying to figure out, what came first. And then if you work backwards, based off of the PCA, okay, guys, remember, they didn't start looking at any of the video footage until the 18th of November. Then on November 24th or 25th, they told local law enforcement to start looking for a white Elantra. Didn't give a year. And then they find it on the 29th, the same day that they moved the victims' cars. So My question is did Brian Koberger's name come before or after November 29th? And even like November 24th, I'm curious right there. And people say, why is this important? Why is this important? Why is this important? Because I personally believe that this judge wasn't going to sign off unless there was some physical evidence to arrest Brian Koberger. Okay. That's why I believe Ann Taylor was asking how many times where search warrants tried to be obtained and they were denied. Mark B says, whoever they're covering up is more important than winning this case. 100. And the only thing more important to people is money. And it would be a lot of money. And what's the one thing that generates everything in that town? The university generates all the money. Without the university, there is no Moscow, Idaho. When I found out the percentage of the University of Idaho students that are involved in Greek life, without Greek life in Moscow, whew. I laugh at people that say that there's all this evidence against Brian Koberger because it may be there, but it's definitely not public. So then you must know something that I don't and the rest of the world doesn't. But getting to Brian Koberger, I believe could have potentially happened, but it would take hella policing to the point such manpower hours to go through a ton of shit to possibly eventually get there. What happened here in 7 weeks, this tells me that there should be no unsolved murder ever. And if we're at that type of a level, think about it. Well, to be fair, you're speaking like you know what you're saying is truth. Yeah, what I'm saying is true. It's taken me from November until now. You know how many man hours have been put into this case? It takes a lot to eliminate things, especially when you're talking about surveillance cameras. How long have you guys been watching Linda Lane? That's one camera. Now go ahead and throw in all these people submitting think about this. Get all these people to submit their Ring cameras for the night of the murder that have nothing on it. go through all of that. Let me know how long you think that's going to take you. You would take every street and you would say, okay, what houses have Ring cameras? You'd have a list for every street. Then you would go to those houses and you would ask them to submit their Ring camera. Do you know how long that would take? Do you have any idea how long that would take? And then you're going to have somebody that has most amazing organizational skills to then make sure that they stay on top of every street and every person and everything that they would be getting back. And then you're going to go through it all. And you're not just doing that on Moscow's campus. You're doing that on Pullman's campus. To arrest Brian Kohlberger in 7 weeks, who has no connection and no affiliation with these kids, that to the point that nobody could have possibly given his name up. And what the FBI are saying, or Moscow saying, the prosecution is saying, is that the FBI more or less just submitted a tip. They did what they did. They came up with, okay, here, look into this kid. And they're saying that they did it from creating a DNA profile from the sheath, okay, to then submit it into the database of these people that have put in to find out their ancestry and stuff like that. How long that stuff takes to do? And that's all we hear about. This stuff takes time. This stuff takes time. Well, this case, this fucking shit happened in record time. Right here. How the hell did you get a sample DNA from the trash on December 27th? How did you get it to the lab in Idaho from Pennsylvania? Who drove it there? How'd you fly it there? What'd you do? And that you were able to have it all back within that time frame, only to then not use it, except for one person. Payne used it to arrest Brian Kohlberger. Meanwhile, something I said to do right off the bat was to take the 2 campuses and see who has these Elantras registered. You know, when you get a parking pass. So then you just go off of that and you're calling people based off of that, off of the registration, off of Moscow's registrations on that campus and then the other campus. You want to know what I think? You ready? People say that they couldn't tip off Brian Kohlberger, yada, yada, yada. I want to know how long these cameras last for. Because it's very, very interesting to me. Who would ever let somebody up and leave if they knew that they were a teacher and that they could be teaching and that they could have went to, like, I don't know, drove off to, like, you know, Mexico, left their car at the border, and then just, you know, who's going to let somebody just leave? Once they would have had the name Brian Kohlberger, just why aren't you asking him about getting into that car? How smart do they think that Brian Kohlberger is to know that he's going to lawyer up and then tell somebody to go get all the camera footage to be able to prove where he was? But if we arrest him so far afterwards, they're not going to be able to prove that. It's so true. Somebody said it earlier. You can't prove a negative. You can't prove that you didn't do something. How do you do that? Until next time, guys, I appreciate the mods, appreciate all the members. Hopefully you guys were able to listen while you guys were at work. A lot of time has gone into this, mass time has gone into this, speaking with people, looking into other cases, seeing how ISP operates, seeing how they all work together or don't they have good relationships. Again, keep being kind to one another.
Limited, and I just knew, hey, okay, you got 3 females, 1 male. They're all between, the ages of 20 and 21. They all live together except the male was in a relationship with one of the victims. So that's why he was there. The victims were found on 2 separate floors, 2 victims on floor 3 and 2 victims on floor 2, like the main floor.
I would also want to know at that point, how often was he there? Was he there a lot? Because that also makes a difference. Or was it rare that he was there?
Okay, well, based off of my web sleuthing, he actually had his own parking spot there. He had a red Jeep that had a parking spot that was, right there off to the side.
So basically, he may as well have lived there.
Yeah, I'm guessing that he was there a lot.
Okay.
And let's see. There was 2 actually survivors, so they were on the bottom floor. They said that they were sleeping allegedly in their rooms and didn't hear anything. And yeah, at this point, the cops are very tight-lipped with stuff. They said that the time of crime happened between 3 and 4 a.m. Now, I will tell you this, that they were getting back. So 2 of the roommates came back together, the boyfriend and girlfriend, allegedly at 1:45 a.m. And the other 2 girls, they were coming back from being out at the bars. And there was a Grubhub, video of them. So they got back at like 1:56 a.m. And the boy and the girl were coming back from a Sigma Chi party at 1:45 a.m. And the 2 survivors were back at 1 a.m. But they weren't together that night. They were out and about differently, but that's kind of just letting you know
how did everybody get back? Did they walk? Did they drive? Did they?
The girls that were coming back from the bar, they had an Uber type of, like a private driver. And it's unclear on how the boy and the girl got back as far as back from the Sigma Chi. So...
the other is the survivors.
The 2 survivors, that's unknown how they got back. Also, the one girl, actually both girls that were seen on the Grub Truck video, they were in good spirits. There was somebody that looked like that they could have been technically following them. The police have gone on the record, though, to clear that guy. With very, very little information, they did manage to give us that they don't believe that the hoodie guy is involved. But they're in good spirits. They're not fighting with anybody. And they're using their cell phones. So we do know that they have their cell phones with them. And one of the girls was said to have been calling her ex-boyfriend multiple times, 7 times. But the last time that she called him was at 2:52 a.m. So she got back.
Does anybody know if that was typical?
Yeah, the family has said a little bit about that. That's normal, and that the family is like behind the boyfriend 100%. That he didn't have anything to do with this, and that they didn't have anything to. He didn't have anything to do with this, and I tend to believe that.
Don't even get me started about that whole thing.
So, so you would take all of that there. So yeah, well, based off of like everything that we just discussed going up until 11/20/2022, how would you profile this? What are we looking at? What's important?
The two biggest things that I can tell you out of that bit of information is that number one, it's targeted, and I say it more than likely. And I say that because you not only have one survivor, you have two, which is more indicative of a plan than somebody just got lucky and went and hid, like, in the bathtub or hid under the bed. They were purposely left because you're not going to have multiple survivors without a reason.
Versus them, like, so do you mean like versus them escaping being, possibly a victim? Is that like you don't believe that either one of these girls escaped them somehow to not be a victim, right?
I mean, at that point, I would have to say, unless they told me they were found in the house. Well, they did, though, because they said that they slept through it.
Yeah, they were found in the house. They were the ones.
So then, yes, I would still say that it's targeted.
Okay.
I would say, like I said, you don't ever, as a good, reputable profiler, you never say, yes, I know this 100%. No, you don't. So, but I would say it's more than likely at that point, I would say that it's targeted and it's personal to some degree. That doesn't mean there's a personal relationship between the offender and the victim. That means that in the offender's mind, it's personal for whatever his reason is or her reason is. I would also say at that point that it could be a female or it could be a male. There's nothing that indicates it's one or the other.
So you would, at that point, you would not be telling me, hey, cross off all the females. There's no way that a woman did this. You would.
No.
Determine the cause and manner of death as
Yes,
homicide by stabbing,
What we know about profiling now is
and determined that it was likely all 4 victims were asleep during the attack. Some of the victims had defensive wounds, and each victim was stabbed multiple times. There was no sign of sexual assault.
There was no sexual assault, they said.
Okay. Then if they said that, then I double back down on the fact that I don't know if it's a girl or a boy. Could be either one. There's nothing in that amount of information that says that it has to be a male. Statistically, just the crime itself, yes, there are more males that commit it than females, but that doesn't mean anything.
Okay. And then it was said that they were allegedly, sleeping. That came out, but they could have been sleeping when they were attacked. Very little defensive wounds for some of them, maybe a little bit of defensive wounds for somebody else. Would that matter in your profile?
Yeah, I would say that not everybody is sleeping. It depends on the type of defensive wound. There are 2 different kinds of defensive wounds. You get defensive wounds if somebody were sleeping, and let's say somebody starts stabbing them so they wake up, but they're in bed. The extent of the defensive wounds that you're going to get the majority of the time are cuts to the palm of the hand and cuts to the inside of the wrist, because their hands are up in front of their face, in front of their body. Also, typically, if you're going to be stabbed in bed, you're confined. You can't move anywhere. So you can't flail your arms around, typically. You tend to just hover them in front of your body. That is sort of the evolutionary way of protecting yourself. So I'd say, so you would be looking, if these people were asleep, you would be looking at just the basic, put my hands up in an effort to protect myself. If somebody's awake and they're actively fighting, not just putting their hands up, but actively fighting, you're going to see cuts on their fingers. You're going to see other injuries to their forearms, to the backs of their hands, to the palms of their hands. But you're going to see more injuries than you would if they're sleeping. So the fact, though, that there are any tells me that, no, they didn't, sleep through it. Then you would have no defensive injuries on anybody.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
And when they said this crime happened between 3 and 4 a.m., but the 911 call didn't come in until 11:56 a.m., would that have anything to do with your profile?
In terms of determining time of death? Or just my profile as to...
Yeah, just in general, would it matter, if you heard from me to say, hey, just so you know, this is the time, 11:56 a.m. is when this...
No, because that doesn't have anything to do with the offender's behavior. So no, that wouldn't factor into the profile.
Okay. And at this
It would be information that I included as a summary of the case, but it wouldn't be anything that influenced.
Okay. And would you do you think this is this one person? Is it multiple people? Would that be still open for interpretation or?
If they're saying anything about it being the same weapon, then I would say that's a pretty much than a guarantee that it's one person. But I'd go ahead and say it's more than likely one person because of the type of crime. You typically don't get stabbings because they are personal in nature. You typically don't get duos and stabbings. It happens. I mean, there's the Manson family, and you do have situations where it happens.
And like the movie Scream?
Yeah, but like this is going to be, you would just have one. You have one offender. You're not going to have two offenders doing this. It's possible, but like I said, if it's the same weapon, then no. And it would be unusual anyway.
So like two army guys that had like the same Rambo style knife.
Highly unlikely.
And that would
Possible, yes.
and that would come out
Probable,
pretty.
no.
That would come out soon though, like blood transfer and stuff like that. With like, you're gonna.
Plus, it's the style of wounding people. Even if you can take two people and tell them to stab their victims, and the wounds are still going to look different because they're still going to stab differently.
Okay.
So you'll be able to tell by that as well that there's more than one offender. You'll be able to tell by the way the bodies are handled. If there are more than two, if there's more than one offender.
Okay. So that's gonna. I mean, how significant is your Emmy play into that?
Determining how many offenders.
Yeah. Do they help in anything with that? Would you want to see an Emmy report?
Yeah, I mean, sure, yes, absolutely, because they're going to tell you, the ME is the one who is officially going to tell you if these wounds all came from the same weapon, because you can look at wounds and they look the same. Stabbing wounds, if similar knives are used, you can have two different knives that just at first glance, the wounds look similar. It's when you really get in there and you look at the damage that's done to the inside of the tissue that tells you whether or not the weapons are the same. So the ME being able to say, yes, this was the same weapon, that's a really big deal.
Okay. So, but right now all we have is what we have, and this was after the 11/20/22 presser.
And I would say it's one offender.
One offender?
Just based on that, yeah.
Okay.
It would be really unlikely for it to be two in such a personal type of crime.
Okay. And anything else I should note here about would you be saying that we're looking for would you ever say like an age range at this point or anything like that?
Given the ages of the victims, I would say between 25 and 35, because as you go up in victim age, you go down in offender age. And as you go down in victim age, you go up in offender age. So because they are kind of right at that sort of starting place for us for profiling, I would stick with 25 to 35.
Okay. And
this guy has knowledge with a knife. He's familiar with a knife. Nobody is going to walk into a situation with multiple victims and not feel confident in what they're doing.
So now that we kind of got the idea of how, it works with, okay, hey, we need a profile here. Before we just start going ham over everything to do with social media, like who can we kind of eliminate? And I made it an early on decision that I did not believe this was a boyfriend of somebody. Why would a boyfriend of somebody kill one dude and three girls? That just made no sense. And it was basically reassured through Sumia here. And so Jack D, go check all my stuff. Jack D, I never did any videos on Jack D. I never thought Jack D was. I sleuthed him. Okay, he was a tennis player phenomenon. Basically looked like he was a lost puppy unless Kaylee was around. Very talented, tennis player. Obviously went to the same college, high school sweethearts there at the end, dated there in college. So they shared a dog together. Everybody was like, oh, but the dog's alive. Maybe he left the dog. He didn't kill the dog because it's his. Yeah, I mean, that all looks good on paper, I guess. But reality of the situation is the profile isn't going to be a boyfriend. It's going to be somebody that wants what they have or a possible setup.
Hard to accept. She was a beautiful girl. She started junior high with Maddie, as you all knew, and our family became 6 very quickly. There was a lot of friends throughout this family that came and gone and went and whatever, and we're still friends, but we don't see him that much. That wasn't Maddie. Maddie and Kaylee were by each other's sides every day. They went to other countries together. Karen took them to Hawaii together. We took them to Mexico together. They went to college together. They went to high school together. They lived in their own apartment together. They were sisters. She was one of ours. And we're just heartbroken, and we know it.
Thought he was kind of losing his mind because it was happened like 4 or 5 different times, and Kaylee would just sit on the couch with a big grin on her face and just watch what my dad would do and how upset he would get. And I believe that's around the time that my dad named her K-Bug.
Bug us.
Because she bugs everyone. And it stuck because it was appropriate. She wasn't perfect. She was our little girl. She was ornery, and we loved her for that. It was okay that was her signature, and nobody tried to change her.
Another thing.
Okay.
Similar to the battery story, back in the day when we had cordless phones, 3 or 4 throughout your house.
Disaster that we're all working through together, you really have to just take care of each other. You got to reach out and hug people, make yourself uncomfortable, and just be part of the healing and take advantage of every opportunity that you can tell your child that you love them, and don't let them walk out that door without giving them a hug. Even if they're annoyed and they don't want you and you're embarrassing, just say, I'll hug you longer if you just don't get this over with. So if that's, it's going to take that. This community is going to help us. We all know that we can't do it alone. And I thank you guys all for here and starting that process right here in our own.
I just read a letter where Maddie wrote to Kaylee talking about their friendship, and it was powerful, and they were beyond sisters, because sisters are, you kind of forced to get along. These two didn't, they weren't forced. They were just like yin and yang. And
Kaylee, Maddie, and one of their roommates, Xana Kernodle, were stabbed to death in their house near U of I on the morning of November 13th. Xana's boyfriend, Ethan Chapin, was also killed.
I'm here for my daughter and Maddie, but there's 2 other people that are just as important, and their kids went through just as much, and their losses are just as real. Like I was going to be required to come out and make sure that the story didn't die, and we built some momentum, and we got everyone involved that we possibly could.
As Jack D was crossed off the list, this episode comes to a close. Please remember the ones that you love, your family, your kids, your parents, your siblings, and I will be doing the same. Check it out. While I am web sleuthing.
He's a good man.
Did he make us?
Yes.
Did he chose us to be made?
Yeah.
How do you know about God?
YouTube shorts.
YouTube shorts.
Everything's on YouTube Shorts?
Yeah.
I learned about God on YouTube Shorts. You believe in God?
Yeah.
You being a good boy?
Yeah.
Okay. I love you, Jax.